I asked Abdullah bin Omar, "O Abu Abdurrahman, I saw you doing four things, which I never saw being done by any one of you companions." Abdullah bin Omar said, "What are those, O Ibn Jurayj?" I said, "I never saw you touching any corner of the Kaaba except those two facing south, Yemen. And I saw you wearing shoes made of tanned leather and dyeing your hair with henna. I also noticed that whenever you were in Mecca, the people assume ihram on seeing the new moon crescent, first of Dhul Hijjah, while you did not assume the ihlal. Ihram is also called ihlal, which means loud calling, because a muhrim has to recite talbiyah aloud when assuming the state of ihram till the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, day of Tarwiyah. Abdullah replied, "Regarding the corners of the Kaaba, I never saw Allah's Messenger touching except those facing south, Yemen. And regarding the tanned leather shoes, no doubt I saw Allah's Messenger wearing non-hairy shoes, and he used to perform ablution while wearing the shoes, i.e. wash his feet and then put on the shoes. So I love to wear similar shoes. And about the dyeing of the hair with henna, no doubt I saw Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, dyeing his hair with it, and that is why I like to dye my hair with it. Regarding ihlal, I did not see Allah's Messenger assuming ihlal till he set out for Hajj on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah." Narrated Umayyah, the Prophet, at the time of washing his deceased daughter, had said to them, "Start from the right side, beginning with those parts which are washed in ablution." Narrated Aisha, the Prophet used to like to start from the right side on wearing shoes, combing his hair, and cleaning or washing himself, and on doing anything else. Narrated Anas bin Malik, Allah's Messenger, when the Asr prayer was due, and the people searched for water to perform ablution, but they could not find it, later on a pot full of water for ablution was brought to Allah's Apostle. He put his hand in that pot and ordered the people to perform ablution from it. I saw the water springing out from underneath his fingers till all of them performed the ablution. It was one of the miracles of the Prophet. Narrated Ibn Sirin, I said to Abida, "I have some of the hair of the Prophet, which I got from Anas or from his family." Abida replied, "No doubt, if I had a single hair of that, it would have been dearer to me than the whole world and whatever is in it." Narrated Anas, when Allah's Messenger got his head shaved, Abu Talha was the first to take some of his hair. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger said, "If a dog drinks from the utensil of any one of you, it is essential to wash it 7 times. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, "A man saw a dog eating mud from the severity of thirst. So that man took a shoe and filled it with water, and kept on pouring the water for the dog till it quenched its thirst. So Allah approved of his deed and made him to enter paradise." And narrated Hamza bin Abdullah, my father said, "During the lifetime of Allah's Apostle, the dogs used to urinate and pass through the mosques, come and go. Nevertheless, they never used to sprinkle water on it, urine of the dog." Narrated Abi bin Hatim, I asked the Prophet about the hunting dogs, and he replied, "If you let loose, with Allah's name, your tame dog after a game, and it hunts it, you may eat it. But if the dog eats of that game, then do not eat it, because the dog has hunted it for itself." I further said, "Sometimes I send my dog for hunting, and find another dog with it." He said, "Do not eat the game, for you have mentioned Allah's name only on sending your dog, and not the other dog." Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger said, "A person is considered in prayer as long as he is waiting for the prayer in the mosque, as long as he does not do hadaf." A non-Arab man asked, "O Abu Huraira, what is hadaf?" I replied, "It is a passing of wind. That is one of the types of hadaf, from the backside." Narrated Abad bin Tamim, my uncle said, the Prophet said, "One should not leave his prayer unless he hears sound or smells something in regarding to passing wind." Narrated Ali, I used to get emotional refill discharges frequently and felt shy to ask Allah's Messenger about it, so I requested Al-Miqdad bin al-Aswad to ask the Prophet about it. Al-Miqdad asked him, and he replied, "One has to perform ablution after it." Narrated Zayd bin Khalid, I asked Uthman bin Affan about a person who engaged in intercourse but did not discharge. Uthman replied, he should perform ablution like the one for an ordinary prayer, but he must wash his penis. Uthman added, I heard it from Allah's Messenger. I asked Ali az-Zubayr, Talha and Ubay bin Ka'b about it, and they too gave the same reply. This order was cancelled later on, and taking a bath became necessary for such cases. Narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Allah's Messenger sent for an Ansari man, who came with water dropping from his head. The Prophet said, "Perhaps we have forced you to hurry up, haven't we?" The Ansari replied, "Yes, Allah's Messenger." Further said, "If you are forced to hurry up during intercourse, or you do not discharge, then ablution is due on you." This order was cancelled later on, i.e., one has to take a bath. Narrated Usama bin Zayd, when Allah's Messenger departed from Arafah, he turned towards the mountain pass where he had answered the call of nature. After he finished, I poured water and he performed ablution, and then I said to him, "O Allah's Messenger, will you offer the prayer?" He replied, "The Musalla, place of prayer, is ahead of you in Al-Muzdalifah." Narrated Al-Mughira bin Shu'bah, I was in the company of Allah's Messenger on one of the journeys, and he went out to answer the call of nature, and after he finished I poured water and he performed ablution. He washed his face, forearms, and passed his wet hands over his head and over the 2 kuf socks made from thick fabric or leather. Narrated Abdullah bin Abbas, that he stayed overnight in the house of Maimuna, the wife of the Prophet, his aunt. He added, I lay on the bed, cushioned transversely, while Allah's Messenger and his wife lay in the lengthwise direction of the cushion. Allah's Messenger slept till the middle of the night, either a bit before or a bit after it, and then woke up, rubbing the traces of sleep off his face with his hands. He then recited the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Imran, got up and went to a hanging water skin. He then performed the ablution from it, and it was a perfect ablution, and then stood up to offer the prayer. I too got up and did as the Prophet had done. Then I went and stood by his side. He placed his right hand on my head and caught my right ear and twisted it. He prayed 2 rak'ah, and then 2 rak'ah, and 2 rak'ah, and then 2 rak'ah, and then 2 rak'ah, and then 2 rak'ah, separately 6 times, and finally 1 rak'ah witr. He lay down again in the bed till Mu'adh came to him, whereupon the Prophet got up, offered a 2 light rak'ah prayer, and went out and led the Fajr prayer. Narrated Asma bint Abu Bakr, I came to Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, during the solar eclipse. The people were standing and offering the prayer, and she was also praying. I asked her, "What is wrong with the people?" She beckoned with her hand towards the sky and said, "Subhanallah." I asked her, "Is there a sign?" She pointed out, "Yes." So I, too, stood for the prayer, till I fell unconscious, and later on I poured water on my head. After the prayer, Allah's Messenger praised and glorified Allah and said, "Just now I have seen something which I never saw before at this place of mine, including paradise and hell. I have been inspired and have understood that you will be put to trials in your graves, and these trials will be like the trials of Ad-Dajjal, or nearly like it." The sub-narrator is not sure of what Asma said. Angels will come to every one of you and ask, "What do you know about this man?" A believer will reply, "He is Muhammad, Allah's messenger, and he came to us with self-evident truth and guidance. So we accepted his teaching, believed and followed him." Then the angels will say to him, "Sleep in peace," as they have come to know that he was a believer. On the other hand, a hypocrite or a doubtful person will reply, "I do not know, but heard the people saying something, and so I did the same." Narrated Yahya al-Mazini, a person asked Abdullah bin Zayd, who was the grandfather of Amr bin Yahya, "Can you show me how Allah's Messenger used to perform ablution?" Abdullah bin Zayd replied in the affirmative, and asked for water. He poured it on his hands, and washed them twice. Then he rinsed his mouth thrice, and washed his nose with water thrice, by putting water in it and blowing it out. He washed his face thrice, and after that he washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then passed his wet hands over his head from its front to its back, and vice versa, beginning from the front and taking them to the back of his head up to the nape of the neck, and then brought them to the front again from where he had started, and washed his feet up to the ankles. Narrated Amr, my father saw Amr bin Abi Hassan asking Abdullah bin Zayd about the ablution of the Prophet. Abdullah bin Zayd asked for earthenware pot containing water, and in front of them performed ablution like that of the Prophet. He poured water from the pot over his hand, and washed his hands thrice, and then he put his hands in the pot and rinsed his mouth, and washed his nose by putting water in it, and then blowing it out with 3 handfuls of water. Again he put his hand in the water, and washed his face thrice, and washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then he put his hands in the water, and then passed them over his head, by bringing them to the front and then to the rear of the head once, and then he washed his feet up to the ankles. Narrated Abu Juhayfa, Allah's Messenger came to us at noon, and water for ablution was brought to him. After he had performed ablution, the remaining water was taken by the people, and they started smearing their bodies with it as a blessed thing. The Prophet offered 2 rak'ah at the Zuhr prayer, and then 2 rak'ah at the Asr prayer, while a short spear or stick was there as a sutra in front of him. Abu Musa said, the Prophet asked for a tumbler containing water and washed both his hands and face in it, and then threw a mouthful of water in the tumbler, and said to both of us, Abu Musa and Bilal, drink from the tumbler and pour some of its water on your faces and chests. Narrated Ibn Shihab, Mahmud bin Arabi, who was the person on whose face the Prophet had ejected a mouthful of water from his family's well while he was a boy, and Urwa on the authority of Al-Miswar and others who testified. Each of us said, whenever the Prophet performed ablution, His companions were nearly fighting for the remains of the water. Narrated as Sa'ib bin Yazid, my aunt took me to the Prophet and said, O Allah's Messenger, this son of my sister has got a disease in his legs. So he passed his hands on my head and prayed for Allah's blessings for me. Then he performed ablution, and I drank from the remaining water. I stood behind him and saw the seal of prophethood between his shoulders, and it was like the Zir al-Hijla, means the button of a small tent, but some said egg of a partridge, etc. Narrated Amr bin Yahya, on the authority of his father Abdullah bin Zayd, poured water on his hands from a utensil containing water and washed them, and then with one handful of water he rinsed his mouth and cleaned his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out. He repeated it thrice. He then washed his hands and forearms up to the elbows twice and passed wet hands over his head, both forwards and backwards, and washed his feet up to the ankles and said, This is the ablution of Allah's Messenger. Narrated Amr bin Yahya. My father said, I saw Amr bin Abi Hassan asking Abdullah bin Zayd about the ablution of the Prophet. Abdullah bin Zayd asked for an earthenware pot containing water and performed ablution in front of him. He poured water over his hands and washed them thrice. Then he put his right hand in the pot and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out thrice. With 3 handfuls of water again, he put his hand in the water and washed his face thrice. After that, he put his hand in the pot and washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then again put his hand in the water and passed wet hands over his head by bringing them to the front and then to the back, and once more he put his hand in the pot and washed his feet up to the ankles. Narrated Wahib that the Prophet, in narration 191 above, had passed his wet hands on the head once only. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar. During the lifetime of Allah's Messenger, men and women used to perform ablution together. Narrated Jabir, Allah's Messenger came to visit me. Narrated Jabir, Allah's Messenger came to visit me while I was sick and unconscious. He performed ablution and sprinkled the remaining water on me, and I became conscious and said, O Allah's Messenger, to whom will my inheritance go, as I have neither descendants or ascendants? Then the divine verses regarding the Fara'id inheritance were revealed. Narrated Anas. It was time for the prayer, and those whose houses were near got up and went to their people to perform ablution, and there remained some people sitting. Then a painted stove pot, mikdab, containing water was brought to Allah's Messenger. The pot was small, not broad enough for one to spread one's hand in, yet all the people performed ablution. The sub-narrator said, We asked Anas, how many persons were you? Anas replied, We were 80 or more. It was one of the miracles of Allah's Messenger. Narrated Abu Musa. Once the Prophet asked for a tumbler containing water. He washed his hands and face in it and also threw a mouthful of water into it. Narrated Abdullah bin Zayd. Once Allah's Messenger came to us, and we brought out water for him in a brass pot. He performed ablution thus. He washed his face thrice, and his forearms to the elbows twice. Then he passed his wet hands lightly over the head, from front to rear, and brought them to the front again, and washed his feet up to the ankles. Narrated Aisha, when the ailment of the Prophet became exaggerated, aggravated, and his disease became severe, he asked his wives to permit him to be nursed, treated in my house. So they gave him the permission. Then the Prophet came to my house with the support of 2 men, and his legs were dragging on the ground between Abbas and another man, Ubaidullah. The sub-narrator said, I informed Abdullah bin Abbas of what Aisha said. Ibn Abbas said, do you know who was the other man? I replied in the negative. Ibn Abbas said, he was Ali bin Abi Talib. Aisha further said, when the Prophet came to my house and his sickness became aggravated, he ordered us to pour 7 skins full of water on him, so that he might give some advice to the people. So he was seated in a mikdab, brass tub, belonging to Hafsa, the wife of the Prophet. Then all of us started pouring water on him from the water skins, till he beckoned us to stop, and that we have done what he wanted us to. After that he went out to the people. Narrated Amr bin Yahya, on the authority of his father, my uncle used to perform ablution extravagantly, and once he asked Abdullah bin Zayd to tell him how he had seen the Prophet performing ablution. He asked for an earthenware pot containing water, and poured water from it on his hands, and washed them thrice, and then put his hand in the earthenware pot, and rinsed his mouth, and washed his nose, by putting water in it, and then blowing it out thrice, with 1 handful of water. He again put his hand in the water, and took a handful of water, and washed his face thrice, then washed his hands up to the elbows twice, and took water with his hand, and passed it over his head from the front to the back, and then from the back to the front, and then washed his feet up to the ankles, and said, I saw the Prophet performing ablution in that way. Narrated Thabit, Anas said, the Prophet asked for water, and a tumbler with a broad base, and not so deep, containing a small quantity of water, was brought to him, whereby he put his fingers in it. Anas further said, noticed the water springing out from amongst his fingers. Anas added, estimated that the people who performed ablution with it numbered between 70 to 80. Narrated Anas, the Prophet used to take a bath with 1 sa, up to 5 muds. 1 sa equals muds of water, and used to perform ablution with 1 mud of water. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas said, the Prophet passed wet hands over his kuf socks made from thick fabric or leather. Abdullah bin Umar asked Umar about it. Umar replied in the affirmative, and added, whenever Sa'd narrates a hadith from the Prophet, there is no need to ask anyone else about it. Narrated Al-Mughira bin Shuba. An Mughira. Narrated Al-Mughira bin Shuba, once Allah's Messenger went out to answer the call of nature, and I followed him with the tumbler containing water, and when he finished I poured water, and he performed ablution and passed wet hands over his kuf socks made from thick fabric or leather. Narrated Jafar bin Amr bin Umayyah ad-Damri, my father said, I saw the Prophet passing wet hands over his kuf socks made from thick fabric or leather. Narrated Jafar bin Amr, my father said, I saw the Prophet passing wet hands over his turban and kuffs, socks made from thick fabric or leather. Narrated Urwa bin al-Mughira, my father said, once I was in the company of the Prophet on a journey, and I dashed to take off his cuff socks made from thick fabric or leather. He ordered me to leave them, as he had put them after performing ablution, so he passed wet hands over them. Narrated Abdullah bin Abbas, Allah's Messenger ate a piece of cooked mutton from the shoulder region and prayed without repeating ablution. Narrated Abdullah bin Abbas, Allah's Messenger ate a piece of cooked mutton from the shoulder region and prayed without repeating ablution. Narrated Ja'far bin Amr bin Umayyah, my father said, I saw Allah's Messenger taking a piece of cooked mutton from the shoulder region, and when he was called for prayer, he put his knife down and prayed without repeating ablution. Narrated Suwaid bin al-Nu'man, in the year of the conquest of Khaybar, I went with Allah's Messenger till we reached Sahba, a place near Khaybar, where Allah's Messenger offered the Asr prayer and asked for food. Nothing but sawiq was brought. He ordered it to be moistened with water. He and all of us ate it, and the Prophet got up for the evening prayer, Maghrib prayer, rinsed his mouth with water, and we did the same, and he then prayed without repeating the ablution. Narrated Maimuna, the Prophet ate a piece of mutton from the shoulder region and then prayed without repeating the ablution. Narrated Ibn Abbas, Allah's Messenger drank milk, rinsed his mouth, and said, it has fat. Narrated Aisha, Allah's Messenger said, if any one of you feels drowsy while praying, he should go to bed, sleep till his slumber is over, because in praying while drowsy one does not know whether one is asking for forgiveness or for a bad thing.